What is the worst case of special snowflake syndrome you've ever seen? Story 1. I was in charge of line wrangling for an event, a free event I might add, when a woman comes up to one of my security staff and explains that her son is autistic and freaking out because he saw someone cut in line and can't deal with it. The security guy explains he's sorry, but they can't be everywhere at every place. But my son is autistic. So the security guy comes to Central and asks how to handle it. The woman is really mad we don't have a way to keep people from cutting in line. But no one witnessed it except the parent and the kid. And when asked to point them out, says, "I don't know, one of those girls," pointing to a group of teenagers. When asked about what we should do about it, she said to throw them all out. No, lady, we're not going to do that. So we got accused of hating and segregating autistic kids. But that's as far as she took it. A public admonishment. Story 2. This girl wants and needs a really good recommendation letter for her upcoming grad school application and comes to me begging for an internship at my company. We don't normally have interns, but we create an internship position specifically for her. After working for us for 2 weeks, we offer to pay her for the internship even though it isn't legally required in this country. She takes 2 weeks, during which time she's working, to come up with a vague guesstimate of what she'd like to be paid. She asks for a starting hourly rate more than twice what her manager is being paid. She takes another week to agree to be paid something reasonable, but high for a college student. She wants to get paid for the whole 5 weeks she's been with us even though she was A, asked to keep a clear timesheet, and B, didn't. While we're still discussing this, she refuses to run a simple errand because it's not the sort of thing she's expected to be doing when coming to work for a company like this. And the internship position that was specifically created for her on the grounds that it would be nothing more than a gopher with a title. We would have fired her, but before we got the chance, she sent in a resignation letter as a PDF in pink Comic Sans with my name spelled wrong. Really hoping she still asks for that recommendation letter. Story 3. I work for a hotel and we had a guy who came in twice a year or so. He claimed to be someone important in the music and recording industry. He would pull up in a nice town car, stay in a nice suite, and generally make sure everyone knew he was supposed to be some kind of big deal. He would tell the doorman and front desk to be very discreet if some music celebrity showed up to see him. He would tell the phone operators to hold all his calls except if Beyoncé's people call, things like that. The only problem is, no one ever showed up for him. No one ever called. He would have his suite set up with conference tables and amenities for big meetings that no one ever showed up for. We Googled him and couldn't find anything about him. So we figure he likes to pretend to be some big shot for his vacations. Pretty sad. Story 4. The girl who was the ex-girlfriend of my ex-boyfriend's little brother. She was always talking about how hard her life was, how her parents treated her, etc. Now this wasn't the problem. I was fine with her venting. But every time you started to talk about something else, she would try to steer the conversation back to her. One time I was talking about how much fun I had playing paintball and she immediately chimed in, stating that she preferred dagger fighting and wouldn't stop talking about it. She also believed in ghosts and thought she was something better because she was in some kind of VIP fan group of a band I was into a couple of years back, and she would lie constantly, like stating that she wrote song text for the said band. Basically, she had the intelligence of 20 meters of a field path, the charisma of a piece of toast, and looked like a cross between a mole and a dead fish stuck in some random gothic clothes, and still thought she was a hot piece of ass. Story 5. I'm glad I finally have a name to put to the illness that affects a lot of military wives in my area. I work at a library beside the base and have to deal with a lot of wives to admirals, captains, SEALs, etc. A military wife came in trying to check out books and a card that had an existing fine of $140 for late fees and processing fees. She handed me her civilian ID and said that her military status should excuse it. I laughed and said, "Sorry, we only take cash or check, not husband's ranks." I just left work and had a lady get pissed off because she couldn't reserve the meeting room. That has been in the books as reserved for months, for Fall Fest. Apparently she didn't like it and said we would have a bunch of Navy wives calling in and complaining to our boss. I told her, "Ma'am, we have 10 other branches that will be happy to help y'all." Story 6. A friend's brother has the worst case of special snowflake syndrome I've ever witnessed. He periodically refers to himself as a demon or the devil, posts endless selfies of himself with, "Oh my god, so ugly, no wonder I'm single," in order to get compliments from fat chicks, and does the super edgy angry atheist thing constantly. But that's not even the worst. No. The worst special snowflake thing this Cho does? He quotes himself on Facebook. He will seriously post something that he thinks is brilliantly clever, and then attribute it to himself. I'm not even joking. One time it looked like this. This douchebag. Goddamn motherfucker. This douchebag. He quoted himself saying goddamn motherfucker like it was some brilliant statement. Why? I'm going to start doing that now. It's gonna annoy the piss out of people. Story 7. Here's a story about how a mother is unaware that she's raising the spawn of Satan, as told by a swim instructor. For 3 weeks, this kid in my swimming class was being a brat, spitefully doing the opposite of what he was told to do. He would jump into the pool when he was supposed to sit on the wall, splash other kids in the face, and basically do everything he was told not to, like borderline ODD. You could see in his face how he reacted with anger when being told not to do something. His expression was, "How dare you tell me not to splash kick water in your face?" I finally made him sit on the bench in timeout, which is usually the last time a misbehaving 6-year-old tries to get away with running the show. While this one came back in, jumped into the pool, not allowed, then lined up a kick straight back into my chest. He missed the first kick, and by the time I realized what this kid was actually trying to do, he re-aimed and hit me square in the sternum. Now I'm 6'1", 200 pounds. I've worked with kids for my entire life. My default is to be the least threatening or imposing person I can be, out of necessity. You have to be a complete non-threat, or else the youngest kids will not even give the class a chance. We call it boy trouble. But in this one case, for the first and only time in my life, I had to physically restrain a kid. I squeezed his arms to his sides and lifted him straight up out of the pool. He tried to kick me again while looking right in my face. I walked right to the door, called his mother, and called for my supervisor to bring his towel to the door. He was goddamn leaving the pool, no matter what mom or anyone else says. We have CCTV cameras in the pool now, so I was particularly confident in case this mother went into denial or accusal mode. Some moms can't handle being told their kids are not perfect, let alone little sociopaths. His mom's stares give a blank stare as I explain to her the sequence of events. This is not the first time I've spoken to her about this behavior. Upon being told her boy struck me, her response was, "That doesn't sound like him. Maybe he just doesn't respond to you." Meanwhile, and I swear to everything you hold dear that this is true, this little tyrant walked over to his little brother, grabbed his head, and pressed his thumbs in his brother's eyes. The mother breaks away to ask him to stop. Not tell, not reprimand. Ask. She asked her son to not attack her other son. She turns back and implies that his misbehavior is my fault, and her son had no problem with his old teacher. Then you drowned them both, right? Right? Story 8. A girl I knew in high school thought everything in the world revolved around her, that her problems were the worst in the world, that everyone should cry for her when she broke a nail. This became most evident when a few of us were chatting about life, and this girl went on and on about how sad she was because the new guy at school hadn't approached her and asked her out even though she totally walked by his locker, and how come he didn't notice her. A moment later, one of the other girls opened up about how her parents had been fighting a lot lately, and she was really scared that they were going to get divorced. She felt like it was partly her fault, and she was crying herself to sleep every night because she couldn't take the guilt of her parents' breakup. Before I could respond, the special Snowflake gave her a condescending smile and said, "Well, I think my head hurts worse." Story 9. While I was in college, I volunteered at a nature sanctuary leading birdwatching groups. It was a true sanctuary and so did not allow dogs at all. Thankfully, there was a public park within walking distance and off-leash dog park within a short drive. It also didn't allow bikes on the trails. Thankfully, the entire surrounding area is extremely bike-friendly and has one of the best and longest dedicated bike trails in the country. But people still broke the rules all the time. My worst encounter was with a man and his young daughter, maybe 8 and 9 years old. I was leading my group over a narrow floating walkway over the lake, but the man and his daughter were blocking the way with their bikes and a big dog. I walked up to them and politely reminded the father about the sanctuary's no bike, no dog rules. He completely flipped his shit. He started yelling at me and asked, "If we can't ride or take our dog here, where the hell are we supposed to go?" I told him about the multiple parks and trails around us that he could use instead. He told me to go to hell and said he'd ride where he damn well pleased. He then started ranting about the sanctuary allowing fucking wheelchairs to roll over the walkways. So why couldn't he bring his bike? And how we couldn't tell him or his family what to do. Meanwhile, his poor daughter is standing there looking incredibly uncomfortable, and my birdwatching group, all sweet old retirees, is getting nervous. I actually had to take my group back to shore to wait while the man wound down and finally decided to leave, but not before throwing out a few more curses and flipping the bird. Story 10. A close friend of mine is dating a girl that he no longer brings near the rest of his friends. They started out as friends with benefits, and eventually, he asked her to be his girlfriend. We've all expressed our dislike for her and that we think he could do better. He had an internship out of town for a semester, and the semester following, she was studying abroad. They decided to have an open relationship during that time, supposedly because she was lonely. It's been over a year since she came back, and in the spring, She tried convincing me that she is asexual and repulsed by sex. I'll give you a quick rundown of other reasons I now have her blocked on Facebook. She constantly has to have a say and make stories about herself. She pretends like she understands things she doesn't to appear smart. She claims that she's a feminist, but always plays the "I'm not like other girls" card. Frequently talks about how her hometown is full of drugs and burnouts despite the fact that said town has a reputation for being very wealthy. Will do yoga, sit-ups, and other workout things during group hangouts. Will throw a fit if the conversation doesn't go her way and people disagree. Used to make comments to me about wanting to die, but when I told my friend and he told her parents, both of them got mad at me. Story 11. 3-year-old daughter of a Hollywood producer worth more money than I can conceptualize, summering in the Hamptons. Susie Snowflake objected to the breakfast her nanny made and held her breath in protest until she passed out. Breath-holding spell. This precipitated not only a trip to the ER, but admission to the pediatric unit for an immediate and quite unnecessary echocardiogram by the head of the pediatric cardiothoracic team, specifically requested by Daddy Snowflake. When the doctor objected, as it was completely unnecessary given the context and preliminary negative workup, not to mention that he wasn't even on call, he was called by the CEO of the hospital and threatened with dire consequences if Susie Snowflake didn't get an echo within an hour. There was some face-saving compromise where she was taken by wheelchair to the outpatient cardio suite instead of a bedside inpatient study, but there it is. Money talks and everyone else walks. Source: I was the rotating resident in PenPed's cardio and watched this all go down in real time. The echo was fine. Story 12. My brother likes to brag about his goals a lot. Goals like getting his bachelor's, getting a regular 8-to-5 job, and buying a new car. He takes his time and says he's the best person in the world and considers himself that he's a better offspring than the rest of the siblings or cousins and other family members. Ever since he graduated college, his ego skyrocketed into the fucking galaxy. Bragged to our nieces that he's the smartest uncle in our family. Brags that he has an important job, but truthfully he's just a grunt in IT. And for the past 3 months, he brags how he's gonna get a Subaru Impreza STI without considering future money needs. More examples because I despise his fucking face. He brags that he's the strongest offspring in our family because he works out and plays a sport. He also notes that he has a better immune system than the rest of us, but really, he had a cold last month. What's really gonna infuriate people is that he sleeps for 2 hours after work, stating, "I'm tired. I worked really hard at work today." But my parents get really heated up in this because all he does is sit at a desk using his head to work while my parents, who immigrated from Laos, raised 5 kids, worked in factory jobs with fair pay using their physical bodies to work, and out of the 5 kids, one of the kids is disabled, making my parents almost understand nothing on what the doctors say about on one of their child. But truthfully, he's just another average person on the planet, just another grunt in the workforce. He shouldn't be entitled to anything. This is why I think my brother wins the Special Snowflake Syndrome Award. Story 13. A customer actually started crying, no joke, because an item cost $2 more than what she thought, and she was already buying more than $100 worth of stuff. I know, it's about the principle of the matter, but come on. A customer at a different store left in tears because she couldn't use a $5 off coupon to pay for a $1.65 soda and get the $3.35 difference back in cash. It's my birthday, and all I wanted was a soda. Yet another customer cried because she couldn't find the one particular credit card that she wanted to pay with. Her wallet was loaded with other cards, checks, and cash. Her husband finally convinced her to pay for everything with cash so I could get to the other customers, and then stand aside while she looked for the card. She found it. I refunded all of the items and then rang them back up so she could pay with that one card. Story 14. I went to high school with a girl who thought her voice was God's gift to earth, yet even in middle school couldn't break into the top choir. Each year, she'd get her choir assignment and throw a huge fit that she wasn't in the top choir and go on to not make it past the first round of any competition that the choir went to. Finally, her senior year, she made it to the top choir, because seniors weren't allowed in the lower groups, and decided that this was the sign she needed that this was what her life was about. So she went to a school known for its choir program, not in the program but destined to break in, left that to go join a touring company, the understudy that never made the production, and finally moved to Nashville to find her big break. She's still there, and I believe just put out her 4th self-released album while blasting our town on social media for not supporting a rising star like herself. Story 15. A local lawyer would repeatedly come into the store where I worked. Every week without fail, he would demand a discount because A, the product he was buying didn't look fresh, B, we were out of whatever he had come to buy, or C, he had misread the price and the real price was making him angry. It wasn't unusual to have to stop what you were doing and bake him a couple of fresh baguettes at 7 p.m., at which point he would demand a discount because all of the baguettes that had been baked that morning were discounted. Dude also had a strange antipathy for our birthday cakes. He would come in with his children, get them to pick out an elaborate cake, fail to order it, then come in pissed off that there were no identical cakes in the display case. Of course, this was always the store's fault. He would then demand that someone make him the requisite cake, but at the price of the cheaper display cakes, plus a discount for his trouble. If the stars aligned and someone actually had the time to make his cake, there was 50% chance that he would be back later with an empty box, complaining that the cake hadn't been fresh and wanted a full discount, plus free cake the next time. I assumed that he would pull this with the other departments too. God knows how much money it cost the store to retain this loyal customer. Story 16. I used to work at a pizza place that served beer and wine, like a lot of pizza places do. And one day I was working behind the bar serving beers and whatnot, and a young guy comes in and ordered a beer. I asked him for ID, of course, and he hands me a military ID. He's 20 years old. I tell him I can't serve him. The conversation went something like this. Although not exactly, I can't remember the whole ordeal 100%. I'm on leave before I go out on a deployment. You can't show a little patriotism and just let it slide? I'm sorry, man, but I'd lose my job if I did. So you're not going to give a guy who protects your country a beer because you'd lose your job? After a back and forth for a bit, he finally left in a huff. I don't really agree with the legal drinking age, but Jesus, you're not above the law because you're in the military. Story 17. I work at a pharmacy and the general rule is, when you receive a prescription that was faxed, you fill it that same day. The city where the pharmacy is generally populated by low-income, blue-collar Latino families who are incredibly nice despite the language barrier, but occasionally we will have customers outside the average, 5% of the time. This particular night, a woman comes in and cuts the long line, demanding that she deserves to be helped first because she can actually speak English unlike these other spics. After being told to go back to the line, she refuses to move, so I go and help her just to get her out of the pharmacy faster. Later that night, she calls us close, asking if we are playing some sick joke on her. Apparently, her prescription said, "Promise time 9/11" on it, and she felt attacked by a pharmacy and that we were all sick people. I tried to tell her that her prescription was sent in on 9/11 by her doctor, so it filled out on that date, but she wouldn't have it. Inevitably, after almost 15 minutes of saying the same thing, I dropped my professional demeanor and said, "Okay, fine, whatever," and hung up on her and would hang up on her every time she called back. She then called corporate on us and they sucked her dick and gave us all warnings for being unprofessional. My biggest fantasy is to dip her meds in a pile of shit and sell them to her. Story 18. I work for a video game company. A couple months ago, one of our employees got a letter from a local teenager, 13, expressing interest in doing a job shadow with us because he loves our games and has an interest in video games. Great. I contacted him and he passed me off to his mom after a couple of emails, and we set him up to come in for an afternoon to hang out. I figured we were doing the kid a favor. Cool. He comes in and is an awkward, nerdy kid, but he has a blast. Goes home, great. 2 days later, I get another email from his mom, saying that he had a great time and can't wait to come back. I respond and basically say that we loved having him, but are going through some changes in the studio, which is true, and unfortunately won't be able to have him back anytime soon, but we'll keep him in mind for the future. Basically, my programming guys had fun with him for a few hours, but he was mostly a distraction from them doing actual work and can't do any work for us. So having him here more than once is pointless. I was hoping that she'd, get that. Nope. I get another email from her the next morning, wanting to know what changes are happening. That's confidential. And what I mean by, can't have him back anytime soon and we'll keep him in mind for the future, and saying that he will be crushed by this news. I'm working on a way to respond to her while keeping it customer service friendly because he's one of our customers. Story 19. The other day on the city bus on the way to my college, there was this guy who started talking to a group who were sitting on the other end of the bus and preaching about how great his college was. Then he turned to me and another girl and was all, "Do you know who I am?" Of course, we didn't. So he continued on to say, "Well, you wouldn't, but I'm a big deal at college, like a really big deal. You don't know me out here, but I'm a big deal there. I lecture there, I'm a big deal and I was asked to lecture here, but I didn't want to, but decided to anyways. They want me here because I'm a big deal." And he went on, and on, and on. He was saying how he came to do research at our school's library, and a girl was warning him that he might not be able to without a student ID. "Oh well, I'm a big deal at college, so they'll understand. You guys don't know, but I'm a big deal over there." Must have said that at least 20 times in the 5 minutes I was talking with him.